A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us today. Coming up on the program in just a matter of minutes, we're going to talk with Dave Kopel, who is the research director at the Independence Institute in Colorado. He's got a great piece at Complete Colorado, kind of taking a look at how we got where we are today in terms of the gun control movement. We're also going to be taking a look ahead at how this moment in time and the number of new gun owners that we have in this country may impact the gun control debate in the years ahead. We will also get to today's armed citizen story, our recidivist report, our good deed of the day. Do have a couple of headlines to get to. Had a judge in California on Tuesday, a Los Angeles judge, declare that the city's ban on gun stores opening is fine and dandy at the moment. Yeah, no violation of individuals' constitutional rights, even though those individuals in LA cannot access their right to keep and bear arms at the moment. This is separate, by the way, from a lawsuit that was filed against LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva over his on-again, off-again orders for gun stores to close. You also have a Los Angeles area assemblyman, Miguel Santiago, who is asking Governor Gavin Newsom to just go ahead and shut down gun stores statewide. Just, right now, the governor's shelter-in-place order basically leaves it up to counties and cities to determine what businesses are or are not essential. Luckily and thankfully, throughout most of California, those authorities have said, gun stores can remain open for business. LA City says no. LA County has said no, and then they said yes, and then they said no, and then they said yes again. But you also have several Bay Area cities and counties, Alameda County, Santa Clara County, I believe, city of San Jose, that have all ordered gun stores to close. That is subject to, those orders are subject to a separate lawsuit filed in the Northern District of California in federal court. Still waiting on a hearing on a temporary injunction for that order. But, again, unfortunately, you've got some officials who really do believe that depriving people of their ability to acquire firearms and ammunition during a state of emergency somehow does not infringe on their right to keep and bear arms. We spoke about that with Dave Kopel as well. Take a look and a listen. Dave Kopel, thank you so much for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
I'm delighted to be here and love the background from Farmville.
Well, thank you. I like the home office. Hopefully you're handling everything all right there in Colorado.
Yeah, working on things, getting the home is more organized than ever, because once you start really getting the home office up to speed, it has all kinds of implications for other storage and organization.
Absolutely. You got a great piece at Complete Colorado on gun rights being chipped away one piece at a time. And this isn't related necessarily to the current coronavirus crisis that we're seeing here. This is generally, I think, a fantastic look at the long term, at the big picture, in terms of our right to keep and bear arms.
Yes, and so the Complete Colorado, which is a online newspaper affiliated with the Independence Institute, was reprinting something I wrote for Colorado Politics, which is our state's weekly political newspaper, and they asked me to do something on the future of gun control, and the best way to, as Patrick Henry said, the best way to judge the future is by looking at the experience of the past. And so what we see is, from the time the anti-gun groups got started in the mid-1970s up to the present, they've had a lot of different issues of the week and things like that. But the consistent thing is they're working to outlaw as many guns for as many people as possible. And part of that strategy is, besides things that I think they sincerely believe would be beneficial, on top of that, they're also just for jerking around gun owners in every way possible, because they accurately understand the long-term thing. If you have a large fraction of the population that owns guns, as obviously most of the United States does, then passing gun control laws is politically harder. But if you can set up some kind of licensing or similar system that will, over the generations, drive down gun ownership, then you got a much better chance. There's lots of people in England, New Jersey, New York City, who might have become gun owners if they'd lived in a moderately free state like, Virginia or Colorado or Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. But, when getting a handgun permit in New York City is about as difficult as getting a construction permit, a lot of people are just not that motivated to go through the process. And so they don't. And likewise in England, if you own any kind of gun, well, the police can show up at or Canada, and show up at your house anytime and look around and make sure that you've got the gun stored safely or properly according to the regulations. So people who don't want unannounced visits from the cops at 9:30 on a Thursday morning don't become gun owners. You therefore reduce the base, and it becomes this kind of vicious cycle. Fewer gun owners, and the remainder are easier to oppress.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that, as you say, we've been watching this in states like New York and California, and it's sort of ramped up. I mean, the coronavirus pandemic has given a lot of these jurisdictions an excuse to make it as difficult as possible for people to own firearms. We're seeing the gun control groups applaud those efforts. You talk about California in your piece. And, right now, the Los Angeles City Attorney yesterday responded to a judge upholding the City of LA's decision to declare gun stores non-essential and keep them closed. And he basically said, listen, there are people who are panic buying, who we don't want to have guns. And so it's better off that they not be able to do so. I mean, that's an incredible statement when you have across the country right now record numbers of gun sales. We know anecdotally that, a lot of folks who are coming in the doors of these gun shops have never owned a gun before. And in California, you got a 10-day waiting period, for goodness sakes, before you can even purchase your firearm. So I'm not sure you can have a 10-day panic period where you're buying a gun, but we're seeing those efforts and those laws that have been in place for years, chilling the Second Amendment exercise for millions of Americans.
Oh, of course. And, this panic buying notion. Yes, when you've got situations like in New York City, where a large share of the police department is out sick, understandably, where they're letting the criminals out of prison, and the cops are being hit just as hard as anybody else, in some ways harder than by this CCP virus. Of course, people are going to rethink, how am I going to protect my family if I call 911 and they say, sorry, we're busy with other stuff right now. It's an attack on people buying a gun for the first time, which gets back to what we were just talking about. They're less concerned about the guy who has 3 guns and buys 4 than the person who has 0 and buys 1. That's what they want to stop, and at all costs. And of course, this is their dream come true in some jurisdictions, is to shut off gun sales entirely. And of course, that this relates to another part of Michael Bloomberg's effective planning, is when you have these laws, so-called universal background check laws, which say that you can't buy a gun from your neighbor you've known for 20 years. You can, or your cousin. The only way you can buy a gun is by going to a gun store. And even if you want to buy from your cousin, you got to bring the cousin down to the gun store and treat that transaction as if you were buying a gun out of the store's inventory. And likewise, your cousin can't loan you a gun. If your cousin says, oh, sure, things are kind of crazy. I've got 6 guns. Yes, you can borrow my revolver. That's a basic gun. Here's how to use it. And you can have it for the next couple of months, then give it back. That transaction also has to be processed by a gun store as if you were buying out of the store's inventory. And so then you choke off any form of acquisition that doesn't go through this government-controlled choke point.
Absolutely, which to me again is that is a deprivation of individuals' rights. I know that in some of the cases that have been filed over the past few weeks, where we haven't had emergency hearings or hearings on these requests for temporary injunctions in every one of these lawsuits, but one case that was filed, I guess, against the L.A. County Sheriff Alex Villanueva and Governor Gavin Newsom, a U.S. district judge in Southern California, a guy appointed by President Barack Obama. He basically said, listen, this isn't the same thing as Washington, D.C.'s ban on handguns that was struck down in Heller. This is not a fundamental infringement on the right to keep and bear arms like that was. I want to ask you, Dave, because to me, yes, in one way, it is not the same as a handgun ban like what we saw in Washington, D.C. On the other hand, it's a complete prohibition on the ability of people who want to exercise their right to keep and bear arms. They can't buy a handgun. They can't buy a rifle. They can't buy a shotgun. If you are an existing gun owner, you can't purchase ammunition in California because you have to go through a background check now to do that. I think that even though this is, supposedly temporary and open-ended, and this will come to an end at some point in time, we don't know when that moment will be. I think that, blocking the ability of Americans to acquire a firearm is absolutely as much of an infringement as Washington, D.C. Saying that, no, you can't buy a handgun and live in our nation's capital.
Right. And in Washington, D.C., you could at least you could actually buy a rifle or a shotgun and take it to your house and keep it there. You weren't supposed to use it for self-defense, but at least you could possess it. And I think this will come back. If you look at World War I, with all these emergency measures that were put on in a wartime situation, the so-called progressives were actually great admirers of fascism as it developed in Italy under Mussolini and of all the central planning of the war. And their political agenda, which got largely enacted in the New Deal, was really just taking the wartime economy control measures of World War I and turning them into a permanent thing in the Roosevelt administration. So, essentially we're in a permanent state of war and the attendant loss of civil liberties. And I don't think there's any question that the response to the CCP virus, that's the Chinese American newspaper Epoch Times coined that to encourage people not to be prejudiced against Asians who are victims, but against the evil entity that caused this global pandemic, the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP virus response here and in other countries is going to be used as a template in the future because there are very broad emergency powers that exist. I don't doubt that there are going to be some places that are going to say, oh, well, global warming is a public health emergency because St. Greta Thunberg says so. And likewise, gun violence, as they call it, by which they mean gun ownership, really, is a public health emergency. And so we're going to come down with all these hammers again. This is not don't count on the 4th of July even being the end of the American people's civil liberties getting hit hard with emergency declarations.
Absolutely. Yeah, we just saw, I think it was a rally in North Carolina yesterday. There was a protest outside of the state capitol, folks gathering, asking that the economy be opened up. From what I saw, people were socially distancing. They were staying 6 feet away, but there was an arrest made. That assembly was dispersed. The Raleigh Police Department actually went on Twitter and said protesting is a non-essential activity. And I got to tell you, Dave, I mean, that gave me the willies when I read that, because every one of our constitutional rights are absolutely essential to us as Americans, and I would say even more so in a state of emergency.
Yes, that's why they're in the Constitution in the first place, is because they are essential. They're the most essential thing in our system of law. And of course, the right to keep and bear arms, they actually declare its essentiality in the amendment itself, that it is necessary to the security of a free state. But this is it's really brought out a lot of the petty and broad incipient tyranny in a lot of people, these declarations of what's essential, supposedly, or not. And I think so. here in Colorado, which is relatively less repressive, and Governor Polis, Democrat, deserves a lot of credit. He's kept the gun stores open. He's said people applying for concealed carry permits don't have to be fingerprinted in their application. They can come back, afterwards and get fingerprinted later. And likewise, he's shifted personnel to get the background checks done faster. But even here, so you can go to Home Depot, which is open, which is good because it's a hardware store, and you can buy a refrigerator. Fine. But how about a refrigerator store? Well, that's closed because it's supposedly non-essential. Or Hobby Lobby is closed because that's non-essential. And yeah, you don't need crafts to live. On the other hand, if you're stuck at home with you and some kids, and crafting can be a really mentally beneficial thing to do. It should be something where you say all stores can be open, but they've got to follow, these appropriate guidelines. Maybe people have to wear masks, you keep your distance, all those kinds of things. But instead, unelected officials are very much cracking down on the idea of anything. It's worse in Britain, but look at Michigan, where they've closed the golf courses. Well, playing golf by yourself is a pretty good way to socially distance. A lot of this control is tyranny for its own sake, and
absolutely
not public health.
Well, and to go back to the gun control aspect, you start your piece at Complete Colorado by talking about they became Brady, but the original name was
National Council to Control Handguns.
Thank you.
Handgun Control Incorporated. Brady Campaign, and now just Brady, right? Trying to fool people into thinking it's that nice family from the early 70s.
And in the New York Daily News yesterday, the president of Brady, Chris Brown, along with a former congresswoman, had a piece, trying to chastise the NRA for suing Governor Andrew Cuomo over the closure of gun stores. And of course, in their narrative, it's all about, well, the NRA is just after profits. They just want to, get money in their coffers. And they don't care about public safety. And again, their attitude is that nobody should be able to own a firearm right now. And certainly no American should exercise this right for the very first time. But, again, going back to what we've seen just around the country, people voting with their feet, going to gun stores, I am curious, how do you think this will change the gun control debate? Because I think you're absolutely right. I think the gun control advocates are terrified of every new gun owner out there. But we may have as many as 1 million Americans who are gun owners today who weren't gun owners 2 months ago. That's right. And so how will that, do you think, impact the gun control debate going forward?
Well, at the least, it's spread more information in the community among not only them, but their friends and neighbors. When, for example, they live in a county in California where the stores are open, but then they go in and they find, you mean I can't just pay for it and leave? I watch CNN and I'm told buying a gun, takes less time than making a 3-minute egg. But no, I got to fill out all this stuff. You care whether I'm Hispanic or not,
right?
And I have filled it out, and then they do a background check on me, the California Department of Justice, and I clear the background check in 20 minutes or whatever, just as long as it takes them to run it in the computer. But I can't have the gun for 10 days. What's and then I got to do another background check and pay another fee for a completely messed up, dysfunctional system for ammunition purchases. People are learning, some of them, how bad the gun laws are and how they are pointlessly oppressive. It's one thing to say background checks, which I think those laws are badly written, but you can understand the common sense appeal of that to the general public. But then to say after you pass the background check, you got 10 days, you got to wait 10 days. Well, what if you're being stalked, or what if you're in a system where the public safety is deteriorating? Maybe you need the gun now rather than later. And that's especially true for business owners, because as stores are closed, residential burglaries are down, but there definitely isn't a problem of business burglaries, that they're shuttered. Nobody's out on the streets to sort of provide visual security and observation. So, they certainly need the ability to protect their livelihood, the small business they created now and not 10 days from now.
Absolutely. Talking again with Dave Kopel, Research Director at the Independence Institute. Again, the piece at Complete Colorado. And Dave, thank you as always, sir, for coming on the program. It's great talking with you. I hope we get a chance to catch up again soon, because I'd love to pick your brain about what happened in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals this week with Boulder, Colorado's gun ban. We still have the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City case that's before the Supreme Court. Hopefully we're going to get a decision on that here in a couple of months. So there's still a lot to talk about, even if we're stuck at home at the moment.
We've got tons of litigation going on. A National Rifle Association, Second Amendment Foundation, and Firearms Policy Coalition are all working together really effectively, more so than ever before, to do a great job about representing Second Amendment civil liberties in court.
Absolutely. All right, Dave, thanks so much for your time today, sir. We'll talk again soon. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We're going to start there, a case out of Florida. And again, I mean, I hate to say it, but we're going to be seeing more and more of these types of cases here. An inmate released amid coronavirus concerns back in the Hillsborough County Jail, now charged with murder, just a day after he was released, according to local news. This from WFLA in Florida. They say an inmate who was released from the Hillsborough County Jail, again because of coronavirus concerns, trying to mitigate the spread of the virus, back behind bars, accused of committing second-degree murder the day after he got out of jail. 26-year-old Joseph Edwards Williams, arrested on a warrant Monday night in Gibsonton, Florida. They say he's connected to a March 20th homicide in the Progress Village area. Deputies responded just before 11 o'clock that evening to several 911 calls about gunshots fired. A man pronounced dead at the scene. WFLA says online records show that Williams had been released from custody at 8:02 a.m. on Thursday, March 19th, per an administrative order aimed at slowing the spread of COVID-19 in the county jails. Sheriff's office says he was one of more than 100 inmates released from custody until trial. Sheriff Chad Chronister said, quote, "There's no question that Joseph Williams took advantage of this health emergency to commit crimes while he was out of jail awaiting resolution on a low-level, nonviolent offense. As a result, I call on the state attorney to prosecute this defendant to the fullest extent of the law." The sheriff's office released 164 inmates that were considered low-level, nonviolent offenders. Sheriff Chronister says judges, prosecutors, and sheriffs around the country are facing difficult decisions during this health crisis with respect to balancing public health and public safety. Sheriffs in Florida and throughout the country have released nonviolent, low-level offenders to protect our deputies and the jail population from an outbreak. Our commitment as an agency is to keep this community safe and enforce the law. Williams was originally arrested back on March 13th on possession of heroin, as well as possession of drug paraphernalia. Sheriff Chronister says, quote, "Every murder, every violent crime, especially those involving a gun, is a sickening example of the worst in our community, especially at a time when our community is working relentlessly to fight against the spread of this deadly COVID-19. I gotta be honest with you. I'm not sure why a murder in which a gun was the murder weapon is somehow more heinous than a murder in which a hammer was used, or fists or feet, as the sheriff would seem to indicate here. And I do understand. We've talked about this many times before, both on the website and here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I get it. And the sheriff is right. There is a balancing act right now between public health and public safety. But if you are a public safety office, guess where you need to come down on? The side of public safety. Listen, unfortunately, stories like this are going to become more common. We even have seen the Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva, the same guy who tried to shut down gun stores. They're going to open, and then they got to close again. They're going to open. Even he now is worried about an increase in violent crime because about a quarter of the LA County inmates have been released to the streets. And it's true. Some of these folks may be held on nonviolent offenses. That doesn't mean they have nonviolent histories. As we saw in New York State, yesterday's recidivist report, where a individual let go one of 1,100 individuals who were released early, put on probation. But this individual was released despite the fact that he had several violent crimes in his past. Again, I realize that these are tough decisions here. But while let's put it this way. If nothing else, while these public safety officials are having to make these difficult choices, and while we are seeing jails around the country emptied out, or at least the number of inmates that would be behind bars under usual circumstances now put back onto the streets, that only enhances the need for Americans to be able to exercise their right to keep and bear arms, which, by the way, does not disappear, as Dave Kopel and I talked about. It doesn't disappear, even during a state of emergency. But that need to be able to exercise our constitutional rights, I would argue, is actually heightened during these states of emergency. All right, on to our armed citizen story from Buxton, Maine, where a Buxton man held at gunpoint after breaking into a home there, from WGME in the state of Maine. It was Sunday. Buxton police responded to a call where a woman had actually phoned police, dialed up 911, said that her husband was keeping a man detained at gunpoint. Buxton officer Eric Sanborn arrived at the home a short time later, tried to take 48-year-old Joseph Harmon into custody, said it appeared that Harmon was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, making unusual statements, may have been in a, quote, altered state of mind. And police also said that Eric Bartlett, the homeowner in question, showed, quote, great restraint and incredible firearms discipline for keeping Harmon in check without firing a shot. WGME says Harmon had apparently stolen a neighbor's vehicle before breaking into the residence. He also dropped a handgun between two parked vehicles next door. That gun was retrieved by Gorham, Maine police. Harmon has been charged with burglary, criminal mischief, theft by unauthorized taking, refusing to submit to arrest. Eric Bartlett, again, not facing any charges. He's getting praise from the local police there in Buxton, Maine. And finally, our good deed of the day from Massachusetts, where a Massachusetts State Police trooper helped rescue 7 individuals from a burning home on Saturday evening. This from officer.com. They've got the details of the story. Sergeant Liam Jones, who is a Massachusetts State trooper, but he has actually been temporarily assigned to the Springfield, Massachusetts Police Department because 14 of their officers are out because of the coronavirus. He was driving out of the parking lot of the Massachusetts State Police Barracks when he heard the fire call about 15 seconds away from where he was. So he showed up there very quickly. Thick black smoke billowing from the top floor, flames burning through a dorm or window. He ran into the duplex, alerted the elderly woman, 2 adult men in the first floor apartment. They were heading outside. He then ran up the stairs, and several people were running down to escape the fire. According to the Massachusetts State Police, quote, Sergeant Jones then proceeded to the second floor, checked all rooms in the apartment to make sure that nobody was left on the floor, tried to climb actually to the 3rd floor attic, but had to turn back because of the thick smoke and the flames. All 7 residents escaped. 2 second-floor residents suffered smoke inhalation, were brought to the hospital for treatment. Unfortunately, 2 dogs that were in the house did perish in the fire. After the building was evacuated, just a few seconds after the building was evacuated and the trooper had gotten everybody out, Springfield Fire Department, Police Department arrived, fire under control in about 5 to 10 minutes. The house actually not a total loss, believe it or not, but about $50,000 to $60,000 worth of damage suffered. Thankfully, again, no loss of life, no loss of human life anyway, thanks to the quick thinking of Sergeant Liam Jones in the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing. We thank you, sir, for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as well. If you participated in Tuesday's VIP Gold chat, thank you for doing that. We had a great time. We're going to do it again next week. In fact, I think we're going to have a special guest join us next week. I'm not sure who it's going to be yet. But we're going to do it again. You can sign up to become a VIP Gold member of Town Hall Media at bearingarms.com. Not only will you be supporting the Second Amendment journalism that we do each and every day, but you'll get exclusive commentary, analysis, and things like the live chats that we're doing now on a regular basis. So we certainly do appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube or Bearing Arms Cam and Company on Apple Podcasts. That way you never miss a program. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. And don't forget, you can check out bearingarms.com throughout the day for the latest Second Amendment news as well. Until we speak again, be safe, be well, be free, and we'll see you here soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company.